Minister clashing with the South Australian Premier over their respective energy policies. Josh Frydenberg was in Adelaide to spruik the Coalition's answer to the looming energy crisis, the project to expand the Snowy Mountains hydro scheme at a cost of $2 billion. And he was highly critical of Jay Weatherill's government for going it alone with its own plan, which includes a new gas-fired power plant and Australia's biggest battery. Mr Weatherill, though, said the federal government is in a white-knuckle panic about energy. Let's get a flavour of the event.
I've got to say, it is a little galling to be standing here next to a man that's been standing up with his Prime Minister, bagging South Australia at every step of the way over the last 6 months, to be standing here on this occasion, him suggesting that we want to work together. It is a disgrace the way in which your government has treated our state. It is the most anti-South Australian government we have seen from a Commonwealth government in living memory. I'm sick and tired of getting these criticisms across the airwaves from the eastern states about South Australia. We can't wait for a Snowy Mountains scheme in 4 to 7 years' time. We have a plan to make South Australia self-sufficient, to stand on our own 2 feet today.
The Premier trying to come into this to crash tackle us at this announcement where he hasn't put any money into this important initiative, which the Commonwealth and the AGL have, just shows you, unfortunately, how desperate he is. The Prime Minister should be commended for his leadership, for his investment in such a nation-building project. And I actually think it reflects very poorly on the Premier that he has to engage in this type of petty politics.
Well, for more, here's South Australia state political reporter Nick Harmson, who was at that press conference.
We sort of knew it was going to be a bit awkward when we learned that both the Premier and his Energy Minister and the Federal Energy Minister were going to be there, but I don't think anyone quite expected it was going to be that awkward, except for Jay Weatherill, of course. He actually, Josh Frydenberg got the first question in that press conference, is this awkward? And he said, no, 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 and Jay Weatherill muttered under his breath, it's about to be. So there was certainly an element of premeditation here from Jay Weatherill. This fight has been brewing for months and months and months. We've had big problems with energy security in South Australia. Now, a debate over whether that's blamed on renewables, a debate about whether the national energy market is broken. Certainly, South Australia the South Australian government has been fed up by what it sees as inaction at a federal level, particularly after Josh Frydenberg floated the idea of a carbon price last year and then was immediately killed off. So it announced its own $500 million plan earlier this week. It was roundly criticised by Josh Frydenberg and Malcolm Turnbull. And there's a sense that Jay Weatherill has had enough, and he's seen an opportunity here to have one of those cut-through moments, and it certainly did cut through. And it's also worth noting, today Jay Weatherill is 12 months out from an election where he'll be fighting to keep Labor in office for a 5th term. The one thing that has consistently worked well for him politically is picking a fight with Canberra. If you think about issues from the River Murray to the future of the car industry to the submarine program here in South Australia, Jay Weatherill has been pretty good at picking fights with Prime Ministers, particularly those who live in Sydney. So I guess we'll have to see how this all plays out. But there's no doubt that Jay Weatherill would have walked away from that press conference, I think, pretty happy.
We have a consistent period of abuse directed across the border, talking down South Australia, trash-talking South Australia's leadership in renewable technology. Then they have the gall to stand here next to a renewable energy project and pretend it's happy families. Well, we're simply not copping that. We're standing up for South Australia. We have today this $2 billion insult where money is being spent to keep the lights on in Sydney at a time when we're facing energy shortages over the coming summer. That's why our plan is about acting. It's about acting in South Australia's interests. It's about making sure that we can stand on our own 2 feet, because we know we've been let down by a federal government that's anti-South Australia.
At the end of that news conference, Nick, Mr Frydenberg had a few comments about Jay Weatherill's behaviour.
Yes, certainly he said the Premier's behaviour was unbecoming and that South Australians wouldn't reflect well upon it. He certainly, I think he would have expected a bit of disagreement heading into today's meeting. But he actually has quite a good relationship with the South Australian Energy Minister who was there, Tom Koutsantonis. They greeted each other with a hug. So whilst there's no personal animosity there, or there wasn't this morning, there might be now. And certainly I think you'll see members of the federal government quite swiftly come in and condemn Jay Weatherill. I saw the state opposition leader here describe Jay Weatherill's behaviour as unhinged. As I say, being stridently critical of the federal government has worked for him in the past. I guess it'll be up to the voters to decide how they interpret all of this.
Maybe Tom will be the next Premier of South Australia, because I think after Jay Weatherill's conduct today, the public would think that is pretty unbecoming, pretty childish, and pretty unacceptable for a senior political figure of this state to behave.
Now, Ros, it's worth noting that Jay Weatherill has had colour copies of his energy plan printed, and he was sitting there with one of those plans today, and he actually tried to foist it on Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg saw that one coming, and he certainly wasn't willing to accept a copy of Jay Weatherill plan.
Nick, thank you. Well, the fire exchange comes on the same day the Prime Minister announces a $2 billion investment to expand the Snowy Hydro scheme to power up 500,000 homes. For more, here's political reporter Alexandra Beach.
Well, the government's announced it wants to boost Snowy Hydro's release of energy by 50%, which would allow it to power an extra 500,000 homes. And this would also, crucially, help with energy storage for some of those more intermittent renewable energy sources like wind and solar. But it does come on the back of earlier this week, South Australia announcing its go-it-alone plan for energy security. And so that's obviously, as we've seen, played into today's announcement. And Mr Turnbull, Malcolm Turnbull, has said that this Snowy Hydro plan is better. Specifically, he was speaking about the South Australian plan for a battery. He said the Snowy Hydro project could produce 20 times the megawatts of that battery, and it could do it consistently for nearly a week. So he's taken aim there. And it's also, he's sort of outlined a time frame for this roughly, which is that a feasibility study will be done by the end of the year, and beyond that construction will begin. Obviously still some questions around the full time frame.
How's the opposition reacted to this, Alex?
We've heard from the Shadow Energy Minister, Mark Butler, who said he wants to have a bit of a reality check on some of these things. Particularly, he raised questions such as saying that this is not a generation project, it's about storage and release. So there's still issues around how we generate more energy. Also, he questioned the cost and the figure, $2 billion figure that's been put about today. And he's raised issues with the time frame. We do know that the Australian Renewable Energy Agency has previously flagged that pumped hydro projects can have a particularly long lead time, so up to 7 years. And we've also heard from the energy economist Danny Price saying that the Snowy Hydro project could be diabolically difficult to deliver, and that it may not ever happen. So Mr Butler's certainly raised concerns about what the time frame could be, when Australians are likely to see any benefit from this. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
But I do want to be clear about some reality checks around this project, even if it stacks up. The first thing is this will take years to build. This is not a 4-year project. This is a 5 to 7 year project at the very least. It does nothing to deal with the crisis that we have in our national energy system right now.
So this really just goes to show how complicated this debate around energy security into the future is. Malcolm Turnbull has said that he believes this will be the defining debate of the year, but the federal government, while it's trying to take the lead here, this is obviously going to be quite the balancing act.
Alex, thank you.